one thing that's really important that you think of and you start to make connections with is how a table and a graph are different ways of saying the same thing. So if you're given the information in a graph like we were yesterday, or if you're given the information in a table, or you're given the information in words like the questions we were just looking at, it's all telling you the same thing. Those examples are all telling you how much money they had after a certain amount of time. So take a look at this question. After an hour, they've got $10. 2 hours is $20. 3 hours is $30. Like, it's the same thing. And this could be in a graph, but it's telling you the same kind of stuff. What are the two most important things about linear relation, Justin? The start and the change. So we're going to figure out both of those things and then start answering the questions. What I want to look at is the change here. From 10 to 20 is up 10. Good. 20 to 30 is up 10. 30 to 40 is up 10. I'm going to check these two. I notice they're going up by ones, but that is eventually going to be important. So that means if I go back 1 to get to 0, I go back, what? Cal, what do you think? 10, very good. So minus 10, and 10 minus 10 is 0. So what do I notice that's important about this one? Brandy, what do you think? Goes up by 10, that's one of the things. What else did I notice? Jade, what do you think? What did we find right here? 0, and that's where it starts. Look carefully. Went for 0 hours. What are my earnings? That's where it starts. In fact, I'm going to write that down. The start. If the two things about a relationship that we need to know, a linear relation, are where it starts and what's the change, I have to know what it means to find where it starts. Like, I have to know what that looks like. I got to know what that looks like in a table. I got to know what that looks like on the graph. And we're going to talk about all those things. Where does it start? That's one of the things as you reflect on your understanding. If you're trying to figure this stuff out and you don't know what, but you're not sure what to do, that's the question you should be asking yourself. How do I figure out where it starts? That's one of the questions. And look at this question is saying how much for 0 hours. So I'm going to say $0. Does that make sense? How much per hour? Anybody want to answer that? Raquel? Yeah, look, it's $10 for 1 hour. $10 in 1 hour, $20 in 2 hours, $30 in 3 hours. Those all look like $10 per hour to me. But I can also, once I've done this, I can look at this number, and I can look at this number, and that'll always give me the answer, $10 in 1 hour, and I'm going to write it down that way. I'm going to say $10 in 1 hour is $10 per hour. So what's the rule? Yep. So I can write it down in words. 10 times the number of hours. From a couple of weeks ago, do you remember what rules look like when we write them as equations? So it doesn't actually tell me anywhere here, so I'm going to make it up. But this says earnings. It says E, so I'm going to use E. And it says we'll use H for hours. How's that sound? So it's $10 per hour. And then you don't have to write this part, but it is plus 0, right? Because it's where it starts. Remember this rule? Where does it start? Is the number by itself. What's the change is a number that's multiplied by the variable, H in this case. How much for 4 hours? So there's a couple ways that we can do this. I start at 0. And every hour I go over, I go up $10. So I got to look at this scale here, and that's 20, so half of that is 10, so there's 10. So in 1 hour it's 10, in 2 hours it's 20, 3 hours it's 30, 4 hours it's 40, and I can draw a nice line. And I could use this line to solve all kinds of things. Like I could figure out, well, what about this? What about for 9 hours? I could follow that across like that, right? So I could do all these things with the line. And I want you to write this down. So how much for 4 hours? We have an answer for that? Jacob, what's the answer for that? 40. $10 an hour for 4 hours. $40, right? Doesn't that make sense? Look, it's in the table. How much for 4 hours? It's there. It's there. $40 for 4 hours. But I wanted to show you this because this is important as well. If you want to put your pencil down and watch, you can. E equals 10 times H. But H, the number of hours, is 4. So E equals 10 bracket. What do I put in the brackets? Walker? 4. Because it was H, and H is 4, so I put 4 in. It's like that substitution stuff. Remember, it was on the midterm. We did that a long time ago. And that's 10 times 4, which is 40. $40 for 4 hours. Take a look. This one happened to have the answer in the table. And it was on my graph. But sometimes, what if it said how much for 163 hours? Do you want to extend your table to 163? No. Does 163 fit on my graph? No. Do I want to draw a graph with 163 on it? No. So that's where the equation comes in handy. The rule. Okay, let's try another one. I want you to get started. You're going to start by looking at the table and figuring out what's happening there. Okay, go ahead. Right, fantastic. I love what I'm seeing. So people did this. I saw people do this. And a lot of people are showing it. That was up 10, that was up 10, and that was up 10. So what do I do with that? I go back 10. And what did you find? Marley, what'd you get? 15. So what does that tell us? Starts at 15 because these are going up by ones. So I go down 1. Very nice. So how much for 0 hours? $15. How much per hour? Justin, what did you find for how much per hour? $10 per hour. So that comes from this, if you weren't sure, right? that rate over there. And it's actually partially comes from that because it's $10 each hour because each one of those is 1, like it's changing by 1, right? So what's the rule? Who's got the rule written down? No? The earnings is 10 times the number of hours plus a starting amount of $15. Very good. How much for 4 hours? Well, some people just noticed, hey, the answer's right there. So it's 55. But I'm going to use the rule, and we're going to graph it too. So if it starts at 15, and then it goes up 10 from there. So after 1 hour, I'm at 25, which matches the table. After 2 hours, I'm at 35. After 3 hours, I'm at 45. That all matches the table as well. So E equals 10H plus 15, and H is 4. What's 10 times 4? Put your pencil down and think about this. $10 an hour for 4 hours is $40. That's what that means. But don't forget that original 15 that we started at. That's still 15. That part has changed. The more hours is going to just change this part. The 15 will never change. That's why we call this the change. If I change this to 9 hours, what's it going to be? It's going to be 90. That's still 15. If I change it to 20 hours, what's this going to be? 10 times 20. That part is still 15. I just add the 15 on at the end. This is the pattern in a linear relation that's so important. And what is 40 plus 15? 55. Therefore, $55 in 4 hours. And that matches the table. So we knew that's what we were working towards. And you might say, why would we bother doing this when we have the table? But we bother because it's nice to see that it matches the table so we can make sense of it. But later on, it's not going to match the table. It's going to be a big number that's not on the table. That's the whole point, right? So you have to know how to do it from all the different types. You got to know how to do it from table, from a graph, from a rule, or from all the different types. And that's what we're going to practice for a little while. Any questions? You get this, right? This stuff makes sense? Awesome.